Can I say hello?
And then, I think you just did.
Oh.
And then, I don't know, maybe another day we'll come back and we'll do some more problems on here. Because I wanted to show you one with 4 terms because you guys actually know how to do it. You just aren't aware that you know how to do it. All right, so I want to do this problem right here. I'm just going to rewrite it over here for a second, just so I can work the whole problem underneath this. Okay, so I just want to do this one real quick. Your quiz is about factoring. You have 4 problems to factor, only 4, and then there's 2 other questions that hopefully you won't have a problem answering. But let's just say this was one of your problems and the directions said factor. What's the first thing you're always supposed to look for?
GCF.
A GCF. Does it have one?
Yes.
What is it?
It's a number.
3x. Okay, so our GCF is a 3x because 3 can go into all of those, and they all have at least one x. Okay, so 3x is our GCF, and then remember, whenever you have a GCF, you build only one set of parentheses behind it. Okay, so 3x times what makes 3x cubed? X squared. And then 3x times what makes 9x squared? Plus 3x, good. And then 3x times what makes a negative 12x? Negative 4. Okay, and then from here, we need to cover up our GCF and try it all over again with what's in parentheses. So in the parentheses, does that have a GCF? No. Is it 2 terms or 3? 3. And when it's 3 terms, that's when we do the a times c rooftop. So my a is a 1. So what do you get when you take your a times your c? A negative 4. What do you want the numbers to add to be?
3.
The 3, the guy in the middle. Okay, Alexis, I heard you. What numbers did you say? 4 and negative 1. Does everybody agree those are the magical numbers? They are. Can I shortcut? As long as it has the 1 in front, we can shortcut. So I just slap down 2 sets of parentheses. In order to get the x squared, x goes here and here. And then I just write those 2 numbers down. That's all you have to do. So that's a positive 4, so I write plus 4. That's a negative 1, so I write minus 1. And that's it. That's right.
Teachers, pardon this interruption. Mr. Johnson has an announcement. Students, listen carefully. Those students, please report immediately to 642. We appreciate your cooperation, students, and good luck.
Okay, so we needed to bring the GCF down, so don't forget that. So if this was a question on your quiz, that's just kind of what you need to be thinking about. Do you have a GCF? Either you do or you don't, and then go from there. If it's 2 terms, difference of squares. If it's 3 terms, a times c rooftop. You feel okay with that? Now, I'm just going to make up a problem real quick. If I gave you x squared plus 9, let's say. If I gave you x squared plus 9, first you look for a GCF. Does that have a GCF?
No.
No, and then 2 terms or 3? 2 terms, so I look to see if it's a difference of squares. Is that a difference of squares?
No.
It is not because it's a plus and not a minus. So I can't factor it. What would I write? Prime. When something doesn't factor, it is prime, and that would be the answer. Okay, so if something doesn't factor, then it's prime. And that happens sometimes when you do this too. Like if I was trying to find numbers that multiplied to be negative 4 that added to be 3, sometimes those numbers don't exist, and then I could not factor that either. But we haven't seen anywhere you couldn't come up with a concoction of numbers, but that could happen. Okay, moving on. Yes, concoction. All right, this is the lesson of the day. We have actually done this before, the first part of this lesson. We did it earlier on in the year. We did just a little tiny bit of factoring earlier on in the year, earlier on in the beginning of the year, but it was when they all had a 1 in front of the x squared or the y squared or whatever. And then after we had it factored, we solved. So if you have 2 factors set equal to 0, then either this factor right here equals 0 or this factor right here equals 0, and then you just solve those 2 equations. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
With me just mentioning that? Okay, if you remember it, super. If you don't, then let's just practice. Oh, the other thing that's really important about this lesson before I get going, these problems have to say equals 0 before you begin. If they don't say equals 0 before you begin, you have to make them say that. So I don't really like any of these problems. Let's look at this second number 3. Does it say equals 0? Okay, I need to make it say equals 0. So how could I move this 18? Subtract the 18. If I subtract the 18, then on the left-hand side it would say x squared plus 7x minus 18. And then if I've subtracted it from that side, it now says equals 0. We practiced that skill earlier on in the year, too. Are you comfortable with that? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I didn't show any work there, but that's what we did, was we just subtracted the 18 from both sides, and that's what it would look like. Okay, so I'm going to try to factor these. First thing I look for, do I have a GCF? No. Second thing, 2 terms or 3? 3 terms. So then I'm going to go and do a times c rooftop. So what do I get when I take my a times my c? Negative 18. What do we want the numbers to add to be? A positive 7. Do you know what 2 numbers do that? A 9 and negative 2. Okay, can I shortcut? I can. As long as it has the 1 in front, I can shortcut. So it's going to go, can you tell me? X plus 9 and x minus 2. Okay, on your quiz, you'd stop right there. But today we're going to actually solve these. So this is saying that you've got 2 things multiplied together to give you an answer of 0. The only way 2 numbers multiply to give you an answer of 0 is if one of these numbers is 0. So I'm going to set my first factor, x plus 9, equal to 0. I'll show you all my work on this one. And then I'm going to take my second factor, x minus 2, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. So the whole concept is, it's saying, hey, we're multiplying 2 numbers together. That gives us an answer of 0. Well, the only way that happens is if the first number is a 0 or the second number is a 0, or both of them. So I just set the first factor equal to 0 and the second. What would you get if you solved that equation right there? X equals negative 9, because you would get rid of the positive 9 from subtracting 9 from both sides, and you get negative 9. What would you get if you solved this equation? A positive 2. You'd get rid of the minus 2 by adding 2 to both sides, and that would give you an answer of x equals positive 2. Now, does everybody remember doing that at the beginning of the... Well, it wasn't really the beginning of the year, probably midway through the year. You don't remember?
I do.
Okay. All right, let's hop back to number 2. Okay, does number 2 say equals 0? Okay, so I have to make that happen. So how can I move the minus 15? Add 15. Okay, so if I'm going to add 15 to both sides, what would my new left side say? Plus 15. And now equals 0. So if you add the 15, it's 0 on the right side, and then there's a plus 15 now on the left. Okay, so I'm just going to go through my process here. Do I have a GCF?
Nope.
Nope. So then 2 terms or 3? 3 terms. So we're going to go and do a times c rooftop. So what does my a times my c give me? 30. What do I want the numbers to add to be? Negative 11. Beautiful. What are they? A negative 5 and a negative 6. I typically give you a little more time to think about it, but since we have our quiz today, I'm going to rush kind of through that. Okay, can I shortcut? Nope, I've got to do it the long way. So whenever you do it the long way, remember you recopy the first term. But instead of using the middle term, you're going to use these guys. So I'm going to write a minus 5x and then a minus 6x. And then I drop down the plus 15. Okay, I'm going to ignore the equal 0 until later. At this point, I'm looking for the GCF out of the front and the GCF out of the back. What's the GCF out of the front have? Just an x, right? The way I wrote it is just an x. Okay, and then x times what gives those 2 things back? 2x minus 5. Beautiful. And then what's the GCF I have going on out of my back half? A 3. 3 is the biggest number that goes into 6 and 15. And then here I get a cheat. If this is 2x minus 5, this has to be 2x minus 5. Remember, they have to be identical. And then I like to come back and decide what kind of 3 it needs to be. A negative 3, because I need it to be a negative 6x when I distribute it, so it's going to be that negative right there. Okay, so then 2x minus 5 goes in one set of parentheses, and then what's left over is x minus 3, that goes in the other set. So if this was your quiz, you'd stop right there, But today we're solving quadratics, so I'm going to bring down the equal 0, and I'm going to actually solve. So I'm going to take my first factor and set it equal to 0, and then I'm going to take my second factor and equal to 0. And eventually I'm hoping you can do this in your heads, and some of you probably already can. So I'm going to set 2x minus 5 equal to 0. And then I'm going to take the second factor, x minus 3, and set it equal to 0. And then I just want to solve those two equations. Okay, without me showing any work, what would you get on that? 5 halves. So to show the work, first you'd get rid of the minus 5 by adding 5. And if you did that, that would leave you 2x equals 5. And then to get rid of that 2, you would divide by it. So if you divided both sides by 2, there's that first answer, x equals 5 halves. What would you get if you solved this equation? A positive 3. Do I need to show my work on that one for anybody? So x equals 5 halves or a 3. And those are our answers right there. Everybody okay with that? So this is no big deal. If you know how to factor, the solving part's easy. You just take your factors and set them equal to 0 and then just solve those two equations. Okay, let's look at number 3. And I'm not going to do all of these. Looking at number 3, does it say equals 0?
No.
No, so what do you want me to do?
Okay.
Let's subtract the 8x. So if I subtract the 8x, it's now going to say
16 is minus 8.
Equals 0. Okay, so we subtracted the 8x. That's why it's a minus 8x now. Okay, so first thing I'd look for, does this have a GCF?
8.
An 8x. 8's is the biggest number that goes into 8 and 16, and they both have at least one x. So 8x is your GCF. Remember, whenever you have a GCF, you only set one set of parentheses back behind it. So 8x times what would give those two things back? 2x minus 1. Okay, let me cover up my GCF and see if I can keep going. So I'm going to cover my GCF up, looking at what's in parentheses. Does that have a GCF? No. Is it a difference of squares? It's a difference. 1's a perfect square, but is this a perfect square? No, 2's not a perfect square. 1 is, 4 is, 9 is, 16 is. And remember that variable has to have an even exponent. So this isn't a difference of squares. So that means that's not a difference of squares. I can't factor it. I'm done factoring. So I'm going to bring down my equal 0, and now it's just time to solve. So I'm going to set my first factor, 8x, equal to 0. And then I'm going to take my second factor, which was 2x minus 1, and set it equal to 0. Take a second and solve those two equations, and let's see what you get. And what do you get? What do you get for the first one? 0. If you would divide both sides by 8, because that's how you undo multiplication, 0 divided by anything is 0. So you get 0 there. What do you get when you solve this equation? 1 half. First you'd get rid of the minus 1 by adding it, and that would give you 2x equals 1. And then you get rid of the multiplication by dividing. So you would divide both sides by 2, and that would give you 1 half. So x equals 0 and x equals 1 half. So we're just solving by factoring. So basically you factor, set your factors equal to 0, solve those two little equations. Do you feel okay with that? How are you feeling about your factoring?
Super easy.
Feel like it's okay? Let's take a gander. No, none of those are complicated. I'm going to have you, I'm going to have you try number 6 real quick, and then I'm going to take you down and show you the next section. Take a second and try number 6. Yep. You want to state your name?
Yeah, Faith has. Add me on Twitter. At Fakers. Shut up. Follow me.
No, Faith, stop.
Can you go where? I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe in a couple minutes, because I want to show you this section down here real quick. It's not difficult, but I just need to talk about it.
It's Cinco de Mayo.
Don't use that kind of
I mean, I'm not, you know, but.
You just offended everybody who's gonna watch that video. This looks like crap. Now I gotta edit that.
No, I was debating whether I was going to draw sticks.
Let's do it. Wait, no, hold on.
Do it, so.
Oh wait, are you solving it?
Oh, no, let's do it.
Yeah, I wanted you to do the whole problem. It shouldn't take very long.
Do you have any copy paper? Because birthday card to do on the bus.
Zilla, you was stepping on those Jolly Ranchers.
Is that slime?
How many did you say you needed? Did you say you needed?
Yes.
What's your numbers? What are the 2 numbers in the roof?
What?
2 numbers in the roof?
18 and 89.
Oh, you Why not? I don't like trying to figure it out. That's like literally the rest.
You just write X numbers.
Like, you can X equals
For the
4 6 or X equals 3 commas. Okay. My candy bowl is not very exciting, so I apologize. I'm going to draw a few sticks. First stick, Judd, I want to hear your equation when you set it equal to 0.
9 squared minus, or x squared minus 9x plus 18 equals 0.
There it is. X squared, and then he's getting rid of the 9x by subtracting it, so he wrote minus 9x, and then he recopied the plus 18 equals 0. Judd, you can help yourself to a piece of candy. So I wanted to see what you guys would do with this. You do have to get rid of the 9x by subtracting it, but I wanted to make sure you guys put it in the middle, because this has to be in order, x squared, then the x, then the constant. Okay, at this point, I want to know, oh, not here. I want to know what to do. Sierra, did you do GCF, difference of squares, A times C rooftop?
I tried to do the rooftop thing, but it's still working on it.
Still can't find the numbers? Okay, so when we do the A times C rooftop, what does your A times your C give you, Sierra? 18. And what do you want your numbers to add to be?
-9.
-9. Good, the guy in the middle. Okay, you can have a piece of candy for that. All right, next person. Well, I would have had you do more, but that's okay. Haley, what are your numbers? -6 and -3. Those are the winners. Okay, you can come get your piece of candy, Haley. Riley, what would it factor like then?
X minus 6 and x minus 3.
Yeah, an x minus 6 and an x minus 3. We can shortcut because of the 1 in front. So x minus 6 and x minus 3. Riley, I don't know if there's anything in here for you, but you're welcome to take a peek. Delaney, what do you get when you solve?
I accidentally did the wrong one. So
Okay, could you do it? Could you do it real quick? Just like looking.
Positive 6?
X equals a positive 6
Then a positive 3.
and a positive 3. That one's easy to solve because you don't have any number in front of the x. So x minus 6 equal to 0, you get the 6, and x minus 3 equal to 0, you get the 3. You feel good? Okay, so those were solving by factoring. We're going to learn other ways to solve quadratics. This is just the first way. Now, this next section is a different method. Do you notice anything different about these problems you see versus the problems we just did? They don't have an x, and that's really important. If you look up here at number 5, there's an x squared, there's an x, that's what she means by no x, and a constant. There's an x squared, there's an x, there's a constant. If you look down here, see how there's an x squared and constant, x squared and constant, x squared and constant? There's no x. Everybody understand? All right, so if there is no x, we can do this method called the square root method. So we're just going to solve these by finding square roots. So your ultimate goal is to get this x squared by itself. So you just use your solving equation skills to get the x squared by itself. Once your x squared is by itself, then that's when you square root both sides. Okay? So let's just do a few. Now, the great thing about this method is they don't have to say equals 0 first. When you factor, they have to say equals 0 first. The next thing we do is quadratic formula. They have to say equals 0 first. But with the square root method, they don't have to say equals 0. So our ultimate goal is just to get this Mr. X squared by himself. So what would you do first? Divide by 3. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3, and then that leaves me x squared equals 8. Okay, and then once you have the x squared by itself, this is when you square root both sides, and we are going to slap down a plus minus answer. There are actually two answers when you take the square root of something. We've only been using the positive one because we've been working with shapes for so long, but there's actually a plus and minus answer. Do I need to go back and explain that? You remember that from your past? Now, so it's a plus and minus square root of 8, but I want them simplified. Does anybody know what it is? 2 square root of 2. Remember how we looked for our list of perfect squares to go in there? And what's the largest perfect square that goes in there? 4 goes in there. How many times? Twice. And then 4 is the perfect square. So what's the square root of 4? 2. And then you can't take the square root of 2, so that recopies. So x equals a plus or minus 2 square root of 2. Or you could have done the little tree with the 8. I know some of you like to do the little tree. Does anybody want to see the tree? No? Okay, so let's look at number 2. So once again, there's no x in the problem, so I don't have to factor it. I can do the square root method. So I want to get this little guy by himself right there. What would you do? How can I get rid of the minus 1/4? I'm going to add 1/4. So I don't want to show it. What would you get if you added 1/4 to both sides? X squared equals 1/4. Okay, so now that I've got the x squared by himself, I square root both sides. As soon as I square root both sides, I slap down a plus minus. Do you know what this answer is? 1/2. You just take the square root of the numerator and then the square root of the denominator. So the square root of 1 is 1, and the square root of 4 is 2. We talked about that earlier in the year, but it's been a long time. Okay, number 3. Because there is no x in the problem, then that's why I can do the square root method. So my ultimate goal is to get Mr. X squared by himself. What would you do first? Divide both sides by 5. And what is 80 divided by 5? 16. How do you get rid of the little pesky squared? Square root. Don't forget to slap down your plus minus. And what's the square root of 16? 4. That one comes out nice and sweet, so that's just a 4. I want to see what you do with number 6. Number 6. I have a mess everywhere. Ooh. Thank you. Should I draw sticks?
No, you shouldn't do that.
Oh,
It's very big.
was not expecting that response. I'll draw a few sticks. I know it's not very exciting, but you still can come take a look. Brooke, what was your first step?
To get the x by itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I divided 2.
Good. You would divide both sides by 2, and then that gave you x squared equals how much, Brooke?
48.
48. Beautiful. You're welcome to come look in my candy bowl for that. Okay, next person. Never mind. Cormac, what'd you do next?
So then you have to square root both sides.
Square root both sides, and then you put down a what?
Do you want like the answer like 48?
Yep, I want to hear it.
Okay, 4 square root of 3 plus or minus 4 square root of 3.
Plus or minus 4 square root of 3. Okay, for those of you who don't know how he got the 4 square root of 3, Cormac, what's the largest perfect square that goes into 48?
16.
16, and it goes in there how many times?
3.
3, and then the square root of 16 is 4, so it's plus or minus 4 square root of 3. So a little bit of simplifying radicals. We haven't done it a lot, but we're going to do it some more next week as well. So these are the square root method because there is no x. Okay, so I'm not going to take the time down on the bottom to work these, but I want to talk about them. So all we talked about today was solving by either factoring or by taking square roots. On number 7, what would you need to do? You would need to factor this. And the reason you would need to factor this is because it has an x. So if there's an x in the problem, not just the x squared, but if there's an x squared and an x in the problem, then we have to solve by factoring. And remember, those problems have to say equals 0 before you can begin. Okay, what about number 8? You can do the square root method. You could actually also factor this, but because there's no x, then we can do the square root method. So because there's no x, we can do the square root method. The square root method, the problems don't have to say equals 0. They can or they don't have to. It doesn't really matter. And then when you look at number 9, what would you do on that one? This one you would factor because it has an x. And then you'd have to make sure that it said equals 0 before you began. Okay? All right, your assignment is page 13. Have you noticed what I put on my board about it? He's due on Monday. How strange. I'll explain why more later. Okay, so I guess tomorrow I will see my sophomores. As far as sophomores are concerned, I guess if your teacher's not in a testing room, you'll go to your class. If your teacher's in a testing room, and I imagine they'll put a sign up tomorrow, if your teacher's in a testing room, then you go to the auditorium, sophomores. But like, I'm not in a testing room, so my sophomores will come to me tomorrow during first period. It just depends on what your teacher's doing. So they should have a list probably on the trophy cases, hopefully tomorrow, telling you. All right, this is due Monday. And I'll explain why more later. But you have plenty of time to get this done. All right, let's quiz it. So no solving on the quiz. You don't have to do any solving. It's just factoring.
Do we get extra credit?
No.